With some crimes, it's often hard to know who's telling the truth. In this twisted case from the UK, a photography student from Cambridge went missing under some very worrying circumstances. But when the police dug a little deeper, the truth that emerged was truly horrible and totally disturbing. Sadly, the police do think the worst. But even after a trial, what really happened to her is still a tragic mystery. Let's dive in. Bernadette Walker, known as B, loved photography and expressing herself through her fashion choices. She loved to dye her hair in rainbow colors and seemed to be super creative, but her family and friends say she was always kind of shy. Her friends, who she mostly made online, also described her as socially awkward. Well, she had a lot going on at home, where life was pretty complicated. Her mom, Sarah Walker, had 9 children, including her, and lived with a man named Scott Walker. Even though he wasn't related by blood, Bea called him Dad. While Sarah and Scott were together, Sarah even changed her surname to Walker, even though they weren't married. However, by July 2018, that relationship was basically over, and Bea's mom was dating another guy. Despite that, Scott Walker continued to live in the house with all of them. This included Bea's mom, 2 little brothers, and her little sisters, one of whom is disabled. That's a full house. Then on July 18th, 2020, Scott Walker collected Bea in the car from his parents' house in Peterborough, where she had stayed overnight. Scott said they had an argument during the drive, and when he stopped to roll a cigarette, she jumped right out of the car and ran off in an alleyway. After this, Bea completely disappeared, and no one has ever heard from her since. But her mom reported her missing on July 21st, after she'd been gone for 3 whole days. That's a little suspicious, right? And they reported this at 3 a.m. A really strange time to report someone missing who's already been gone for that long. While they were still looking, Bea's mom gave this statement on social media. "We have had no contact with her since 1 a.m. on July 20th, when she texted me to say she would be home soon. None of her friends have heard from her, and she's not accessed social media." Now, Bea was someone who pretty much lived on social media, so this was super unusual for her. There was a big search in the area of Calbit, Lincolnshire, which is a really rural part of the UK. Despite that, there was still no sign of where she'd gone. Her mom asked the public to help her in distributing posters, and everyone obviously hoped that Bea would be found and get home safe. But not everything was how it seemed. In September 2020, 7 weeks after she was declared missing, the Cambridgeshire police made Bernadette's case a no-body investigation. These are super rare because a lot of the evidence can't be proven easily, but they do happen. This meant that even though there was no trace of Bea, not even her remains, the police were really sure that something awful had happened to her. Due to the length of time Bernadette has been missing and concerns she may have come to some harm, we made the decision to declare this a murder investigation yesterday morning. And they seemed to have a pretty good idea of who was to blame. They searched the family home, and the suspicion quickly fell on Scott Walker. He had been the last person to see Bea, and it turned out he had a pretty strong motive for wanting her gone. Then, in an even more horrible twist, they arrested Bea's mom as well, because the horrifying reason why Bea was with her grandparents right before she vanished, apparently she'd told her mom that Scott had been violating her for several years. Later at the trial, they revealed that her mom told Bea that she didn't believe her. So it was decided she should spend the night with her grandparents while things calmed down. Mom of the year, right? Her grandparents have said that Bea cried when they asked her to talk about what was happening. Gotta say, that makes the thought of him picking her up the next day really creepy and even more worrying, right? It doesn't make sense that he was the one to come and get her if he had been doing this to her. So it's hardly a shock that during what was probably a very upsetting drive home, she ran away. But when questioned, Scott hasn't been able to pinpoint exactly where she ran off. When asked why he had told the police he was at Salter's Way, not Skater's Way, he said, "Remembering stuff is difficult. I'm unconvinced." The police seemed sure that Scott and Sarah were trying to lay a false trial, which would explain why they didn't report her missing for 3 whole days. And the police can track where a phone is, right? Don't these guys watch any movies? Now, here is where their suspicious actions go off the charts. On the day Bea disappeared, Scott's phone was switched off for 91 minutes. which included the time he claims she left the car. He then rang Bea's mom and talked to her for about 20 minutes. Within 30 minutes of Scott calling Sarah, Bea's mom had sent a message to one of Bea's friends pretending to be her daughter. It said, "I ran away. I don't want to be in trouble for lying." Oh, and Scott and Sarah Walker also made a lot of trips to a lock-up garage between July 18th and July 20th, when more messages were sent from B's handset to her mom's phone. The police traced each phone's location, and B's was at that lockup, so she almost definitely didn't send those texts. Police charged them both with sending messages from B's phone between July 18th and September 12, 2020. Remember, B had no phone, no ID, and no way to get any money since she ran off. Scott and Sarah also hacked into B's social media accounts and changed some passwords. But these attempts at sneakiness didn't seem to convince many of the people who knew B well. A close friend of B's testified that he was suspicious about messages he'd received from her after she went missing on July 18th. He said they contained words B didn't ever use. The friend also said they'd seen a post on social media about what Scott Walker was allegedly doing to B just before it was deleted. And on July 20th, he began to receive messages from B's mother asking if she had heard from her. Scott and Sarah also gave the police false info relating to her disappearance. And then, to try and save her own skin, B's mom turned on Scott and started working against him with the police. She claimed that Scott was threatening her and made her send the fake messages. I don't know what happened in the car, I just know what happened afterwards. I just know he forced me to send some messages. And it gets worse. She also told the police, "This was a man who threatened me. He has threatened to kill my partner and slit the dog's throat." So it sounds like B's mom knew a lot, but not all, about what had really happened to her daughter. However, before reporting her missing, Sarah did multiple Google searches for how to track a mobile phone, how to track a mobile phone's location, and I think my partner knows where my missing child is, which kind of suggests she was preparing to cover something up, doesn't it? Sarah Walker also sent a message from her own phone asking friends of B to block her daughter on social media because she had lied about the abuse claims. Was she being threatened to do this? Was she trying to cover for Scott? Well, Scott was pretty horrible to live with. Another piece of evidence against him says that he apparently filmed B in the bathroom. He says because he was hiding candy wrappers and toilet paper rolls. Sarah also told officers that B had sent her a shocking text message describing even worse things that Scott had done to her. I think we can agree that that's totally disgusting, and it makes me so mad for B. She was being hurt by one parent and being called a liar by the other. She must have been so confused and scared. Scott Walker still insists that the family made up these stories because they just want him out of their crowded house, which also makes some sense, especially with the gross camera situation that he didn't deny. Even so, this is a super extreme way to go about it, isn't it? Even if people have faked this kind of disappearance case before, Sarah's defense lawyer described Scott as being controlling and narcissistic and a liar who spied on her and her new boyfriend. The court also told about pictures of bruises on Sarah's face caused by Scott. Scott says they were caused by B's mom hitting herself with a piece of wood, but he could never come up with a reason why. At the time of recording this video, Scott still denies all the charges and also denies 2 counts of perverting the course of justice, though she pled guilty to the 2 counts of it. FYI, she didn't even speak in court during the trial to avoid a sideshow. Frankly, neither of them come out of this whole situation very well. Even if neither are guilty, it does not look great, and the prosecution described them well in a statement. They lied to everyone around them about her disappearance, and they were unflinching in their pursuit of their devious, wicked plan. There's a heap of evidence that they deleted important messages on their own phones. And if you add in all the weird deceit between when B vanished and when they declared her missing, but nothing about this is simple. And even if Sarah didn't directly do anything, she's being charged with helping along. But Sarah's defense insists that there is no reason in logic and no reason in evidence for Sarah to believe Bernadette was dead and had been killed by Scott Walker. And on July 26, 2021, they found both Sarah and Scott Walker guilty of their charges. Full sentencing will happen on September 10th, 2021. One reporter said it was partly down to B's loyal friends giving their evidence so effectively. I want to give special praise to Bernadette's friends who gave evidence. They should be very proud of themselves. Incredibly mature for such young people. The sort of friends everyone should have. And to wrap up, let's hope they find out the truth about what Scott did to B. But because her mom and Scott diverted the investigation for so long, it's believed that any hope of finding B's body disappeared with her. Well, I really hope they're wrong about that. So, what do you think about this case? Is Scott Walker really guilty? And how much did her mom have to do with it all? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.